Hey everyone, welcome to Neighbor Science, the only podcast about political economy and anime. I'm Ryan Salisbury.
I'm Kris Nivens.
Today, we are talking about probably one of the most interesting topics that I can think of.
This one's a fucking ass rocker.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to bump our numbers like crazy because people are just going to be talking about this all over the net, you know? You're going to be like, oh man, I can't believe no podcast has talked about this before because I'm just reading about it every day. Like everyone's talking about it all the time. And, just no one ever talks about it on podcasts for some reason.
Yeah, it's like marginally more interesting than like math rock.
Yeah,
I would say.
I would say it is.
It is a kind of math rock.
Yeah, it's basically the math rock of economics.
Basically,
I would say.
Which, I don't know if that tells you anything, but...
So today we're talking about government bonds.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Now, this is very technically distinct from government bondage, but not very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost the same thing.
This is for the rich.
Yeah.
Sort of more like regular bondage is for the rich as well.
Yeah.
So just an intro. Let's talk about the very basics of bonds, because I don't know about y'all, but a couple of years ago I had no fucking idea what a bond was.
Oh yeah. What is this? Some kind of other money?
Yeah.
It's a birth certificate with numbers on it?
I'm a normal dumb guy that's learning all this stuff. I've just had a little bit longer to learn it. So I'm relaying it to all you listeners. So the very basics of bonds they are a financial security, and a security is just like an agreement that has to do with finance, essentially. It's
pretty
like
much,
it's like an asset.
It's essentially like a signed promise.
Yeah.
If you think about it socially speaking.
Yeah. Like a stock is a security. All those derivative fucking things that nobody understands. Securities. Bitcoin security.
Yep.
So, it's a financial security where the issuer / borrower promise to pay back the buyer / lender. That's not right. The issuer / lender promises to pay back the buyer / borrower a specified amount at the specified date. Maybe it was right. I don't know. I wrote it very confusingly. So basically, the government sells you a promise to pay you back more than they gave you.
Yep.
Or more than you gave them.
Right. This is the magic of
God damn, man. I'm just,
You're just
confusing everyone right out of the
now.
gate.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have probably heard of like savings bonds, treasury bonds. It's, I give the government $100, and then in 5 years I get to collect $110, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
And so U.S. Treasury bonds are a familiar example for Americans. Most governments, to my knowledge, issue bonds, and Kris actually went and verified this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I looked up. I was just suddenly curious, and I looked up whether the Democratic People's Republic of Korea issues bonds, and in fact they do. They tried a stint in I think the 70s, and then all the bonds defaulted, and then which, I mean, I get it. Communism versus capitalism, why fucking wouldn't you default your bonds if you're trying to sell them to other people? But
they didn't have MMT.
Yeah, exactly right. And then they kind of I think kicked them back up in 2003, excuse me. They're called the People's Life Bonds, which, I get that. But yeah, moving back to the main.
I was just thinking every time I think about North Korea now, I think of this segment on John Oliver, which of course is a liberal show with pretty bad politics.
Right.
Quite a lot of the time.
Your dose of confirmation bias.
But
tonight.
their segment on they had some segment about North Korea, and it was honestly some of the best pro North Korea propaganda ever, because they showed this woman who was giving a guy a tour and was talking about how Kim shot a bullseye from 300 yards away when he was 4 years old.
Oh my god!
And the reporter was smugly is wow, that's pretty impressive. Saying oh, obviously that's bullshit. And she's just yeah.
That's
and then later on, they bring up President Obama to this random North Korean woman, and they're like, "Oh, what do you think about President Obama?" And she says something in Korean, and then the translator turns to the guy and she's like, She says that if she had a gun, she would like to shoot him. I was like, hell yeah, this lady rules.
Yes. Hell yes. That's so fucking funny.
Yeah, left me with a better image of North Korea than I went in with, I gotta say.
Right. Oh, and just on that note, I actually just listened to this episode by Pearls of the Round Table.
Okay.
A podcast of like, I guess they're self-described.
Knights of the Show. Pearls of the Round Table.
You know what?
Knights of the Show.
Oh, Knights of the Show. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I'm slow. But yeah, they did an episode recently about North Korea, mostly from like the modern experience of Xiangyu, who is like a rapper who like went and visited North Korea, and like talked to.
This is a Chinese rapper.
Koreans. I think it's Chinese Korean, American or something like that. And apologies if I fucked that up. I was half listening. Anyway, but it was pretty interesting because like they did talk like Xiangyu and other like visitors like on this tour were talking to the quote unquote handlers, right, about like, oh, what's life like, and like and like one of the guys is like, oh yeah, it's fine, and he's like, oh, and then one of the people who was like just this fucking bootlicker was like, so, I mean, do you even own your house? And the guy's like, why would I have to own my house? I'm like, and I know, like, I'm fucking pirating this from the other podcast, so like, listen to the whole thing if you're interested in this stuff. Like, of course, it's from like a more of like I think a Marxist-Leninist point of view. So like, if you're cool with that or if you're into it, like, go for it. I just thought it was really interesting, and I'm whatever. But like, yeah, the guy was like, why would I have to own my house?
Yeah.
And like, well, I mean, you want it to be secure, and like, what? I mean, well, if you can't own your house, then like, how are you going to sell it? And he's like, why would I want to sell my house?
I live there. What are you talking about?
Right. He's like, this is not a problem.
Are you crazy?
For me. Right? Yeah. And then I was like, this is fucking.
That's
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
I like how that was the glorious own that he came up with. Like, oh, you don't own your house? Ugh.
Right. And then
like,
you
know how everyone in the U.S. owns their house?
Right. Yeah, right.
That really common thing.
Yeah. Oh, I own 3 houses.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. They're all made of paper, and
I think we need an American rapper there. We need to send Lil Xan to North Korea.
Yes.
So at the end of this episode, I'm going to go ahead and start a crowdfunding project to send Lil Xan to North Korea. Okay. So, about bonds, corporations can also issue them. Mm-hmm. It's one of the 2 securities that corporations can use to raise funds from investors. Mm-hmm. The other being stocks. Mm-hmm. Other securities like options, futures, etc., are like more complex arrangements around these 2 basic elements. So, the first question is, why would governments bother selling bonds?
Interesting.
So we're all MMTers here. Yeah. Everyone who's listening, all about MMT. They're hashtagging it all day.
Branding it on their forearm and shit.
Yeah, we're yelling at politicians saying like, taxes don't actually raise revenue for the government. That's not true. Taxes destroy money.
Yeah.
So we're all doing that. So we're already asking ourselves, why would the government need to sell bonds? That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
Well. The main reason the government sells bonds is to allow banks to drain their excess reserves. So there's
just like taking shit.
Yes. Yeah. Let's banks shit out their excess money.
Amazing.
So banks have like all sorts of regulations around them, and depending on their size, they have different reserve requirements. Mm-hmm. And then there's also like these rules. I don't fully understand them because I'm not boring enough to spend enough time reading them to truly understand what they are. Yeah. Maybe I will understand that like in a couple of years, but right now, pretty stupid.
Yeah.
But so basically, like if they have a certain amount of excess reserves, they get like preferential interest rates for loans or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so by buying bonds, they can get rid of those excess reserves, meet those targets, and so on. And then they also have liquidity requirements. So like a certain like tranche of each part of like all the bank's money has to be, in a certain form of money. Mm-hmm. So they have to have like probably a certain amount of cash, a certain amount of mortgage loans, certain
amount of raw diamonds,
all that kind of bullshit.
Certain amount of chattel slaves.
Yeah, and, blood from young people.
Right.
etc.
Free.
Dark energy.
Yeah. Replaceable yacht parts.
Ancient fetishes
yes.
that channel the souls of their ancestors.
Yes, I mean. Like, frankly, like, what household doesn't have
right.
an ancient fetish that channels the soul of your ancestors?
Yeah. Mine's actually in storage right now, but,
right.
you know.
Yeah. And what's crucial here is that they have to amass a certain amount that they're able to then trade.
Right.
Yeah. You know. It's really dehumanizing, frankly.
Okay, so let's see. So
liquidity requirements.
Yeah. A lot of the point of this is for a central bank policy called interest rate targeting. So they're trying to, according to them, balance the amount of money in each part of the economy in order to maintain a certain interest rate, which is supposed to control inflation,
right?
Which controls all this other stuff in the economy because they have a real handle on how reality works, and they understand, cause action at a distance is not really a thing, and all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, this is I just came up with 2 wild analogies. One is the kind of people who are boring enough to read about bonds and master finance and shit like that are basically the kind of, and like, my brother's like this a little bit, so I'm not trying to diss on people too hard for being this way, but they're basically the person who reads through the entire fucking board game manual 2 or 3 times in a row in front of people, never gets to fucking playing the game unless it's Monopoly, and then they win somehow because they're fucking obstinate, you know? But, like, that's it. And then they're like, oh, you lost because you didn't read the rule book, and you're like, no, it's because this game is shit.
Yeah.
And then the other analogy.
And when anyone is like, hey, this rule is like getting in the way of us playing the game and it sucks. So like, how about we just do it out?
Yeah, we're just people.
Like,
let's just fucking
you can't do that. The rule book says no.
Yeah. And then they shoot you with their cop gun, and you resisted arrest. Actually, I was questioning a system that doesn't benefit me, out loud. But and then the other analogy that I had was basically like all this bullshit that like central banks and everybody else in again in finance and economics and like mainstream economics and shit like that, and like fucking financial policy and stuff, all these fucking wonks and shit.
Yeah, Matt Brunig and
Matt Brunig's, like they like talk about all this shit like, oh, we're trying to like level out the amount of inflation, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, this literally is the same fucking kind of thinking that led like Western quote unquote doctors to like bleed people and like cut holes in their skulls because sometimes cutting a hole in your skull lets off a pressure, but they're like, it's because there's spirits in there. And you're like, oh, there's spirits in my fucking brain. Oh, wow. And they're like, yeah.
So what you're saying is bonds are trepanning for the economy.
Basically, bonds are trepanning for the economy. Yeah, and bloodletting. Yeah, it's a ritual that actually only happens like to help sort of sometimes, but who does it help? Not sure. How often does it help? Not sure.
And I mean, the worst part is like on top of not understanding the causes of inflation, they don't understand the effects either because they're like,
endless books with no conclusions about this stuff.
The reason that economists want inflation on a small level, they say that it's good to have a small amount of inflation because if we had deflation,
they must be fantastic
nobody
lovers.
would ever buy anything because then rationally you can just hold on to your money and spend it later.
Right.
Because, that's how people actually think about stuff.
Totally.
Like, oh, I could buy a car now and be able to get to work. Yeah. But if I wait till next year, the car will be, $200 cheaper.
Right.
So why would I buy a car now?
Yeah.
This is how things work.
Yeah. And that's actually, like, revelatory of, like, how fucking bourgeois their thinking is because they're always assuming that you're just operating in the margins and that like you're fine at the foundational level
exactly
level. That you're like, I'm not at risk right now. I'm not going to be homeless if I do this instead of that. Like I'm just playing with like my fucking fat, and
of course they're never worried about like wages going up.
Right.
So the logical conclusion is eventually inflation gets to a point where nobody can afford to do shit.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck these.
But of course, we
need
it to stimulate spending.
Right.
Yeah, these people are terrible.
God damn it. We have to
Okay.
master MMT to destroy them somehow.
Yeah. So the purpose of interest rate targeting is to control inflation. Raising the interest rate is supposed to slow inflation because it's more expensive to borrow money, and so you can't do as much investment and blah, 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 whatever the fuck it is. Who cares? It's fucking wrong.
Yep.
But we can also easily show that this doesn't work.
Not even
Because as we will talk about in a little bit, Japan has had low to zero interest rates for like a long time, and they have deflation.
Yeah.
So
and like negative interest and shit. Like
yeah. But I'm sure that's all just like distortions or whatever, and any day now it's all going to come crashing down for Japan. It can't go on like this forever.
Right, yeah.
But the thing that we're doing, of course, can go on forever, and is what should be happening forever.
In the clear light of day, this is the only way to do things.
Which, if you remember, right before the financial collapse in 2008, they were all saying, this literally will go on forever.
Yep.
We have solved economics.
Yep. Oh, yeah. The, like, fucking end of history shit.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the end of history shit today. Of course I was. But, like, how it's so fucked that people live in these, like they're like, it's like they don't recognize that they're, like, carving tiny little wormholes through, like, possibility, right? And I'm getting a little theoretical here, but, like, people are kind of, like, creating, they're, like, actualizing possibility in ways that are path dependent, which is, in the economic sense, like, it depends on what came before, right? And so their awareness and what they are physically able to do are all evolved in a way, right? So your consciousness is evolved, in both like a neurological and cognitive way, but also in a historical way, right? But then everybody is so fucking busy jerking off to the idea that they're, like, the latest fucking thing, right? And that, like, if I just do what came before a little bit better, like, and, like, every idea that has fucking gone through one ear and stuck, is like the best I can fucking do, and probably one of the only options that's out there, like all these folkways and lifeways and everything like that. Like, I'm just the shit, right? And if a bunch of people get together and they're like, I'm the shit, and we sort of agree, kind of, maybe we think consensus construction, like we were talking about sociolinguistics and shit, like then they end up becoming fascists and shit, because they're just like, oh, well, this is the only way, and fuck anybody who disagrees, even though I don't have any kind of bedrock rationale for any of it. Yeah. And even when I do have an appearance of a rationale, if you probe it critically, it all fucking collapses, and then I freak out and I become a fascist and I kill you anyway. You're like, fuck, people are extremely flawed. And
yeah, I think pretty much any time the left has, like, had a major loss has been when people think that it's the end of history. Yeah, and that, exactly. Like, oh, we've won. Everything's good now. Yeah, I mean, like in the 70s, there was the whole hippie shit. Yep. And they're like, oh yeah, we had the social revolution. Yeah. Like, everyone's a hippie now. Like, nice. Yeah, we're all done. And then neoliberalism hit, and it's like, well, fuck,
just spraying
cocaine.
And
then between, I don't know how the fuck this happened after George Bush, but we elected Obama, and people were like, oh, this is the end of history. Racism is defeated forever. Like
if we want to get into,
did you forget about the like people terrorizing Muslims for the last 8 years? Or
I mean, Obama is, like, an interesting example of a concept that I'm, like, admittedly only kind of Cliff Notes familiar with. Yeah, on the left, but, like, the idea of the spectacle. Yeah, right. Which, like, I think, like, it.
Good band, by the way.
Kind of. Oh, really? I should look into that. But you can kind of nutshell it, like, the spectacle is kind of like this, like, mediated relations between everything and blah blah blah, blah, and how, like, people are, like, relating to, like, the media itself and all this kind of shit. Okay. And, like, Obama is basically just, like, the spectacle, or like a facet of it, and, like, was a result and a vessel both for, like, a fucking like PR boost campaign thing, like he's a medium and he's media, and he creates medium and media, and, like, and that's, I think, one reason why, like, this, like, the hyper unrealism of the Clinton campaign just got eviscerated, and, like, and yet people cling to it because they were like, they believed in the spectacle, but it didn't function.
They were both like perfect images of like the political thought at the time, because and Obama was the good version that people liked, and Hillary was the real version that everyone hated because it sucks.
Right. Yeah.
And then Trump is the same exact thing for the Republicans.
Exactly. Yeah. Trump is the spectacle in a way, and also Trump is like a kind of like inverse sort of. I mean, he's a spectacle in a bad way or negative way for like liberals and shit. And so, I think that is a big part of like the quote unquote end of history narrative with the Obama era. Yeah. Right. Is that like, oh, we like symbolically did something. We did something in big fucking quotes. And like, I mean, I remember when the Onion ran like right after the fucking general election in Obama, like when by like a pretty good margin, and like the Onion ran this fucking hilarious headline where it was like black people all over the United States super creeped out by all the white people smiling at them. And I was like, yup, because I could fucking see it happening, you know? And it's because, like, in a way, like, I mean, because, like, black people and other minorities were perpetually made into a spectacle of their own kind, right? And like either fetishized or like all these other things that, like, again, I'm not well read enough to like sum up in 30 seconds for this purpose, but like that became kind of transmuted into like a different kind of like weird ideological symbolic support system for like thinking that Obama meant like liberalism had won. Like, symbolic, like blue donkey American happy rich white people liberalism. Right? Closing this section, I guess, of our like discussion, or at least sort of pinching it off and moving on back to bonds. Hey, maybe it's a balloon animal. I don't fucking know. But what's interesting is that, everybody blames everybody else for the quote-unquote collapse of the quote-unquote liberal order and the rise of Trump and all this bullshit, right? Right. Like, we're all busy blaming each other, and we're all right? Yeah. I've never been wrong, everyone else's fault, so that helps.
Except for me.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. But what's interesting is that, like, to me, the alleged success of 8 years of Obama, right, was, again with the spectacle thing, it was like the spectacle was a mirror, in this case, in which the socially dominant were looking in the mirror and preening. Yeah. Right? And then the socially non-dominant or oppressed, or the people who felt that they'd been politically pushed aside, like the classic white working class and blah, blah, blah. A lot of people who went Trump or Bernie, or just fucking classically just sat it out every fucking time. Right. They were looking in the mirror and seeing exactly what they've always seen and saying, what the fuck is this guy doing for anybody but them, right? Yeah. And so it was weird because it was like a crystallization of all the things that had been there the whole time. Mm-hmm. And it clarified, like, I have mentioned it before, that I have a friend, acquaintance, whatever, who, we were in our 20s during the Obama era trying to get stable, steady, gainful employment, right? And we I ended up going ultra left. Mm-hmm. And he ended up going fucking, like, alt-right fascist shit. Okay. And it was from the same fucking conversations where he and I both, like, would be like, oh, yeah, like, all of our fucking lib friends think that, like, Obama saved everything somehow. Right. You know? And it's clearly untrue. Yeah. Like, we and a bunch of other people we know are all suffering, and in Seattle, the, like, continued problems with homelessness and like various kinds of like hard drug health issues, essentially, and other things, and economic recession was continuing, and we went in basically opposite political directions, but from the same fucking sort of not paradox, but like the contradictions of capitalism, right?
I think there was something like that too during the Obama era, where we now have these two camps of like people with just melted brains, just talking about conspiracy theories all the time. One half is, of course, QAnon.
Yep.
And then the other half is the Russiagate people.
Yep.
And during the Obama presidency, it was the Obama is a Kenyan Muslim who's coming to steal all our guns so that he can make America communist. Yep. And then Obama isn't doing anything because he's actually playing six-dimensional chess, and he's about to like unleash the hounds at any point now.
Right.
I mean, the Russiagate thing has like the same function. It's like,
oh,
well, the reason things aren't getting better is because there's this outside force that's preventing the people that want to do the right thing from really doing it, from really having the power.
Right.
But they're about to defeat it at any point now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's again, it's this kind of like weird, like quasi-religious, like confidence or faith or fervor or whatever in a thing that is merely essentially a media vehicle, a spectacle, or part of a, and which simply exists to do what they have fallen for,
right?
Which is to channel their social power back into the elite.
Yeah,
right.
And it's funny because if you strip all the like racism and xenophobia and shit from both of those two conspiracy theories, QAnon is so much closer to reality than Russiagate. So much closer.
Man.
Anyway,
so that's the funny thing about bonds.
Yeah. Just as like we were saying just now before. So how is this whole interest rate targeting bullshit supposed to work?
Trepanning.
Yes. Yeah. So it's supposed to operate, of course, on economists' favorite shit that they explain everything with: supply and demand.
Yep.
So if the money supply shrinks, the interest rate is supposed to increase to reflect the scarcity and vice versa.
Yeah.
This makes no sense on multiple levels. For one, there's no real limit to the number to the money supply because it's just numbers in a fucking computer.
Yep.
They can create as much as they want.
Exactly.
Two, there is no demand for money, especially from banks, whose whole thing is giving out as much money as they can profitably afford to.
Yep.
So if anything, I would think that interest rates would drive money supply and not the other way around.
Yeah, it's funny because like I've always suspected that even before I got into econ. I was like, wait, isn't this just because like people raise prices and raise interest, and so like you have to have more money?
Yeah.
So you're basically just writing it into existence, and of course then somebody else was like, no, it's supply and demand.
Yeah, like it's just like how inflation is also explained by supply and demand.
Yep.
Like, wow, it's weird how supply and demand of money somehow controls both interest rates and inflation.
Yeah.
But okay.
Some kind of weird bidirectional control there, yeah.
Yeah, but also interest rates control inflation as well.
Yeah.
I don't really get it.
Doesn't really make sense.
But what was I? Oh yeah, people think that like money supply and demand controls inflation, but I think if anything, like an increasing inflation rate means that the government has to issue more money to cover the extra expenses of everything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have this graph here that's like the econ theory of interest rates.
It's absurd.
Which of course is a linear graph. The line is downward descending as they always are. There's some equilibrium that that it meets there. So there's interest rate on the y-axis and quantity of money on the x-axis, and as quantity of money goes up, interest rate goes down, and vice versa.
Which totally just happens in the real world.
Really real stuff.
Stuff that always happens exactly that way on a
straight
line.
I went on Fred, which is the St. Louis Federal Reserve portal for like all of the metrics that they keep.
Yep.
And so I basically made some charts that compare M2 and M3 money supply to the federal funds rate. So just to explain all that shit, money supply has a bunch of different measures because there's different forms of money. So M1 is the amount of actual cash that's in circulation, I believe. M2, I think, is cash plus bank deposits.
Okay. Oh, right.
So like deposits that are owed to savers And then M3, I think. I mean, I'll just look it up real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
It's, I think it's that plus credit.
Yeah, and together they form 5 mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which, if they are combined, become
Captain Planet.
Captain Planet. And Captain Planet is dying. We are killing Captain Planet with our emissions and our waste.
Well, I'm killing him with my nocturnal emissions, but that's just me. M3 is a measure of the money supply that includes M2 as well as large time deposits, institutional money, and market funds, short-term repurchase agreements, not sure what that is actually, and larger liquid assets. So it's basically just like
Larger,
more
super
types of
precise.
money.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, and then the federal funds rate is the effective interest rate for central bank loans. So, yeah, I made a chart. Check out the show notes. I'll probably delete the first 2 because they're pretty bad, actually. I was still learning how to use the graphing tool. It's actually very powerful. I was surprised. You can just put any data series on there, and it has like a drop-down list that's like... do you want like the dollar amount? Do you want the change from the year before as a percentage? Do you want the percent change from the last observation? Like, there's all kinds of shit you can do. You can even like make your own like data series basically by like typing in a formula of the data series they have in there, and it'll like parse it into like a new series, which is pretty cool. That might be a little too powerful for me. I'm just like a normal mortal.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's somewhat of a relationship in money supply and interest rate from 1958 to 1975. A lot of the inflection points in the series match up with the lines going in opposite directions. So as interest rate goes up, money supply goes down. But it's still pretty I don't know how to describe it. There's a lot more variation in the money
fake.
supply. Yes. There's like way more variation in the money supply than there is in the interest rate.
Yeah. Well, I think I just like... It's so funny that... I'm hanging my head and rolling my eyes. It's just so funny that they're like, this is how the market works, naturally. Invisible hand. And then you're like, oh yeah? Is that why you like obsessively tinker with interest rates all the time? To control the money supply, theoretically, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Fuck.
So, yeah, from 1958. I'm not saying that the relationship only goes back as far as 1958. That's just as far back as the data series goes. So I can't actually see whether or not it goes back further than that. But anyway, so from 1975 on, just coincidentally when the neoliberal turn happened.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Probably nothing to do with any of this, the following information, but. The relationship becomes much more subtle and conflictual after this. So if you look at the graph, like the interest rate starts going way, way high, and the money supply is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So, and then like at a lot of points, like the trends are following each other instead of being reversed. So, as far as empirical evidence goes. Unless you expect me to do like all this like complex statistical bullshit that I really don't think is very illuminating. Generally, I think it's
and might actually
just to tease
be
out
obscuring.
a relationship that you want to prove exists,
Right.
and not necessarily proof that it actually exists. It doesn't look like these two things are really related that much.
Yeah,
maybe they were at one point.
Yeah, well, and I want
of policy
exactly,
but
I want to flesh out what you just said.
Okay.
Which is looking for the result you're trying to get, right?
Yeah.
That's econ. That's literally how you're trained to be an economist. And that was one thing that was very frustrating when I had to do my quant courses. Because I'm like, okay, I'm not amazing at math. I can fucking do it. But most of like the logic in those courses is, well, the theory says this, therefore fit your equations to the theory.
Yeah.
And not like try to like fucking figure it out in some other way. It's like, no. If it didn't match, then you have to redo the equation to justify, to rationalize, essentially, what the theory demands must be said.
Yeah.
You see
I
what
see
mean?
this in studies all the time, too,
Yeah.
where they come up with this
like, that's
model.
super
it's just
bad
like the most complex math equation you've ever seen in your life.
He's like, oh well, we have to include more things just to make it sort of fit. Somehow.
And then the
fucked up.
The data still doesn't fit the prediction of the model, and then they're like, oh well, there's probably some confounding factors.
You're right, exactly. They always say bullshit.
Not
just
like,
make excuses.
oh, I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah. It's literally endless academic level making of excuses.
Yes.
And that's literally how they train you to become an
they're not even good at it. They're not even good at lying.
They're not. Yeah.
They need to have more classes on lying for economists, I think.
Yeah. Seriously. I mean, even
it's like, all right, so at the end of your story, do not say, and then everyone clapped.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and like I even like when I worked with a couple of like OG fucking economists who've been doing this shit since like the 80s or 70s. I was trying to like write a couple of like fucking economic reports for them to send to a client, and like I was struggling with it because I was like, how do I actually at that time still thought like maybe there's a way to make a good narrative out of these fucking data points that I literally got from Fred or some other source, some fucking bureau. And I was like, I don't know about the future of this industry we're reporting on. And and they literally, I was like, what do I say? I'm struggling, And the guy, super brusque, and was just like, just make it look good. And I was like, okay, so like, how do we come up with like? Do you need me to
make it look like something that a journal that's trying to make money would publish?
Basically, yeah. He's like, just like make it look good, make the story like a happy story, and tell them that things are going to be great. And I was like, oh, I see. Like you don't even believe this shit. Yeah.
Yeah, very cynical.
Yeah, very
cynical people. Yeah. I was friends with a bunch of econ majors at my college, which I believe I've mentioned this before, but is George Mason University, the Koch-funded college with the Mercatus Center, which is like the most right-wing, probably econ department in the world, I would say. So somehow a lot of my friends made it out just regular-ass liberals. They just were very stupid about economics.
Oh, yeah, right.
Like, that was when I got really into like the zeitgeist movement and like resource-based economies and shit. Right. And so I would talk to one of my friends who was an econ major about that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And his thing was always just like, well, we could do that, but it could be good, but it could also be bad. And so we should just not do it instead. Right. It's like it could be worse than what's happening now.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but people all over the world are dying.
Yeah,
this is like the height of the troop surge and all that bullshit. Yep. And it seems like everything's kind of bad right now.
Really bad, yeah.
We just had a financial crisis, and because of like fucking douchebags in a glass building in New York, people are like being kicked out of their houses. That seems bad, right? It seems like it's hard for things to get a lot worse than that from like the economy. Yeah. So, but no, we don't know what would happen. So.
Man, oh my god,
that classic thing that you always know when you're changing, broad, social change. When you're making broad social changes. You're like, oh yeah, we know what will happen.
We know exactly how this will turn out. You know what? Like, let's.
We could let people be gay.
Yeah,
it could be better, but it could also be way worse.
What if
the family breaks down?
Could ruin everything. Yeah.
So I'm gonna skip the bond rating agencies thing.
That shit sucks.
Basically, anyway. There's bond rating agencies, and I think they're businesses. Yeah, they're businesses, and they assign ratings to bonds, and. Coincidentally, all the countries that have the high bond ratings are like the ones in the imperial core, and the ones that have the low bond ratings are the ones that are in the periphery, especially the socialist countries.
Fascinating.
Just total coincidence. It's because of economics.
Yeah. Just because, obviously they're inferior and they don't know shit.
Yeah.
And they're super uncooperative. And
so now we get to the fun stuff, the case studies. So we'll start with Japan. So Japan.
So the
has had-
Kokudaka system.
Yes.
So rice.
Yeah. So the central bank does all these cadastral surveys, and
Yes.
they assign an estimated amount of rice that they can generate from.
What's sad is that might actually make banking more interesting.
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool. Yeah, we're gonna do surveys of like fucking rice, fertile land and shit.
But
Like,
what level of polish is the rice?
Uh-huh,
That's
right,
what you
yeah.
gotta really
Like,
ask.
looking at it with a fucking jeweler's monocle or whatever.
Yeah,
they call
yeah.
it.
Yeah, if you're gonna have if you're gonna rate a financial business in terms of rice, is it sushi rice?
Yeah.
Is it rice for Junmai? Is it basmati rice? What the fuck is it?
Yeah, what is this shit?
We don't know.
Yeah.
So Japan has had a low or negative inflation rate for about 40 years, which, according to economists, was supposed to destroy the economy.
Right. Simultaneously bad and impossible.
39 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Panic.
somehow it hasn't, which is weird. Another weird thing is Japanese government bonds, which are the equivalent of U.S. Treasury bonds, are currently issued at a negative yield. So, according to economists, the reason that anyone buys bonds is because it's a rational thing to do, because you save your money now, you defer consumption,
Right.
in order to get a greater reward later.
Yep.
But Japanese government bonds, you pay a certain amount of money, and then later on you get less money, which is a classic investment strategy, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So why would anyone buy them? Why would anyone buy a negative yield bond? That doesn't make sense according to conventional theory. Kind of defies ordinary logic, too.
Well, you see, after spending 6 months next to a Japanese family in Los Angeles, I understand Bushido, the code of the warrior, in which your self-negation is critical to the success of the society. Now suck my cock.
Yeah, when you think about it, buying a negative yield bond is really a lot like seppuku.
Yeah. I was parodying it, but I kind of believe it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But I don't want to commit like social and race class essentialism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everything comes back to fucking top knots and swords.
Yeah. But I do really
Except
like
when it does.
I do really like the image, though, of businesses committing seppuku.
Right. Well, the CEOs do that when they fucking fail.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? And they hang themselves and shit.
Definitely one of the coolest things about Japan.
I was going to say, like, that's one of the best things about Japan is that they actually do kill themselves instead of just, like, laying off. Well, they might lay off the people anyway, but, like, and then those people kill themselves. That sucks.
Yeah, instead of, like, getting them off their board seat.
Right.
And then putting them on the board of a different, smaller business.
Right. Right.
We're putting them in the government.
Yeah, exactly.
So, why would anyone buy a negative yield bond? According to Investopedia, which is the first place I always go when I'm reading about this kind of shit, just background on this, as much as 30% of the global government bond market in 2016, as well as some corporate bonds, were trading on a negative yield, which that's crazy. That's even more than just Japan. It's a lot of the government bonds. It's almost a third. So their first reason is the correct reason, which is insurance companies and pension funds who have to own bonds. Even if the financial return is negative, they have to meet liquidity requirements.
Right.
And when borrowing, they can also pledge them as collateral.
Right.
That's correct. And then they add all this other shit. It's weird because usually they say all the incorrect things first, and then at the very end they're like, oh, and also, in some cases, the correct thing.
The thing.
Yeah.
Bearing the lead.
So another reason is that some investors believe they can still make money even with negative yields. For example, foreign investors might believe currency will rise, which would offset the negative bond yield. So I tried to figure out how this shit works. So I take $1,000 and I trade it in for 90,000 yen. So the exchange rate is 90 yen per dollar.
90,000? That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's actually 90 times as much money as $1,000.
Oh my fucking god!
Which is why everyone
I gotta
should
go to
just move
Japan.
to Japan. Yeah, you'll be rich.
I could buy a house in like a month.
And so I used that 90,000 yen to buy 895 Japanese government bonds at 100 yen 50 cents each. Do they even have cents over there? I don't know.
I forget what the term is, but it's like it's a cent like
Pence,
denomination. Yeah,
probably.
pence, Japanese pence.
Doubloons. pieces of 8.
Yes, pieces of 8 are favorite.
So
Yes.
100 yen and 50 pieces of 8. And those bonds will yield 100 yen and 33 pieces of 8 each.
Or the derivation in dollars, right?
Yeah. So in that time, the yen's trading value rises to 100 yen per dollar. So if I trade the money back, I would have $897. So I'm not sure how this is supposed to work.
Right.
Maybe it's supposed to work like a short sale, which I still don't like. I have to look it up every single fucking time I think of like, what is a short sale? Because I'm like, how the fuck does this make sense again?
Well, it's funny because like doing that many trades of money will cost you way more than the $2 you could make.
Yeah, there's transaction fees.
There's like transaction.
Yeah, you
shit.
can't just like trade money.
Yeah.
Like Pokemon cards.
Yeah, it's like I mean, there's maybe like high frequency trading, but like that's maybe not even in the game. Yeah.
You have to give a first edition holographic Mew card for a second series holographic Charizard.
Right.
And you also have to give up some fucking trainer cards.
Yeah. God damn it.
They're going to give you that Charizard for fucking free, motherfucker.
Yeah.
So,
Be fucking crazy.
They have all the power. They have the Charizard, man. They know you need it.
Yeah. I mean,
nobody cares about the original 151 cards. The set is the original 150. That's what's valuable. So,
that's the thing that was at the end of the Investopedia article.
Yeah,
that he was actually quoting directly.
Yeah, I was reading off the web. So yeah, like not only does it not make sense to do that, like even if it does make sense somehow, like if the yen would rise against the dollar, why wouldn't I just hold it in cash?
Right.
And not take the loss of the transaction fee and the bond sale fee, which I'm sure there probably is.
Yeah. Well, now this...
Maybe there isn't a fee for that. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
So this is actually something... so we have become, through the graces of fate and fortune, friends with Teen Sheng from Escape from Plan A.
Yes.
Great guy, very smart. And he
hung out with him on Friday. It was cool.
Yeah. We were hanging out, and we also he and our comrade Jay.
Wait, that was totally Sunday, wasn't it?
That was Sunday. Yeah, I didn't want to bring it up. It's okay. We live in a slipstream. They guested with us. We guested with them. I guess it was a crossover. And talked.
Yeah,
to
I actually wanted to ask him
stuff.
to come on this, but I didn't think of it until like yesterday.
Yeah,
that'd be like pretty short notice.
Yeah, so Teen and I were talking about, and I can't remember if this was a part of the conversation you were there for because you came a little later.
Yeah.
How one of the reasons that the Asian financial crisis, which I lived through for at least a year or two, and some of the aftershocks of it in the late 90s and early 2000s, the Asian financial crisis was partly a result of the tendency of Asian people, as in Asia, to save a lot and not spend much, but also if... Yes, which is as if you could hear Ryan or not, which is caused by deflation. And when they do spend, like spend, they're spending on things like assets, like I gotta get a house or something like that. Like it's bad to have. What was it? Teen was saying. I think it's like bad to have like money in hand or something like that. Anyway. So there's this interesting relationship with money that they have that is unlike sort of Western capitalist cultures.
I was actually here for this.
Yeah. So what were you hearing?
They don't like having cash. If they come into any amount of money,
Yep.
they buy a house or they buy some kind of asset immediately because money isn't wealth.
Into savings.
Stuff is wealth.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is correct.
Yeah, which is correct, exactly. And so then the restructuring that began to happen because of all this pressure. Speaking of the whole end of history bullshit, all this pressure from like the IMF and everything was like, oh, you have to restructure your economies and do this and that, and pressure your consumers, pressure your people to like save less, spend more, save less, spend more. Basically like fuck them up.
Yeah,
essentially. Well, it fucked them up.
Uh-huh.
I think that with Japan, which is this like extremely capitalist country, like consumers were, making money and not putting it back into the pockets of the powerful and so forth. And so I think, as I understand it from what Teen and we were talking about, the negative interest was essentially a way to encourage spending.
Yeah.
If I understood that correctly. It's something about manipulating the way that you see like the assets you're buying and like the money you have or don't have, so that you're like, oh well, it's good for the country if I buy these this deflating assets and shit, and also at the same time like, oh, but I should spend the money right now,
right?
It's weird psychological shit. But because it's attached to culture and the way that the culture and the people that are in the culture view cash, right? Anyway, so it's
but
a
as we know,
way to
the
explain that.
economy is this big machine,
right?
And
totally,
the central bank is
rational,
the Kanban
linear,
board that we all look at.
Yep.
And
we just
when they
plug numbers
lower
in.
the interest rate, that tells us all, you need to spend more because stuff.
We just know
whatever,
because we're just rational animals.
Yeah, and then we look at that and we're like, oh my god, we need to follow exactly what they're telling us to do with their magic signals.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously something that evolved in humans.
Yeah.
Somehow, this perfect system of economics as a result of like hundreds of thousands of years of apes wandering in the swamps of sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
Right. And eating like fermented fruit off the ground, which then got them drunk and stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually exploring caves and blowing dust under their hands to make shapes on the cave walls. This led to this hyper-rational system of supply and demand.
Yeah, they went into the cave and they discovered voluntary exchange.
Yeah. And
then capitalism was born.
Which is automatically.
That's what voluntary exchange is.
It's totally not a product of a bunch of fucking property interests in specific parts of the world.
It's not a total statecraft.
Yeah.
That was invented in the 1200s.
Fucking, God damn it.
Yeah. Okay, so
let's see. More on Japan.
Do we even care about the other reasons that they cite? I mean, they're so fucking stupid.
I think we just established that we don't care.
Yeah, this doesn't work. Okay.
If you're interested, you can read the show notes.
Yeah. And we know you're all interested.
Yeah. Everybody's passing out right now.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, I have to be drunk just to get through this. And then they get too drunk because, who would want to get through this?
Wow, you're just describing what's happening to me right now.
That's actually what I'm doing right now. Yeah. This is therapeutic. Drink up. I think I actually will have some more. I'm drinking Rittenhouse Rye, bottled in bond under U.S. government supervision. Speaking of government supervision.
So there's an article that I found, just to briefly mention it, that the Bank of Japan, which is a commercial bank, I'm pretty sure, is by far the largest buyer of Japanese government bonds, even though the bonds have cute mascots on them to encourage normal people to buy them.
Of course they fucking do.
So... Yeah, basically, bonds are all bought by banks because they have liquidity requirements and interest rate targets and all that shit. And that's the reason they buy them. So even if they're negative, they will still buy them. It doesn't matter if it fits orthodox economic logic.
Yeah.
That's just what happens.
Yeah. Some science.
Yeah. Yeah, according to another article from February of 2019, overseas investors bought 638.3 billion yen of Japanese government bonds.
Holy shit.
In 5 days.
Oh my God. That's just gluttony.
Yeah, it was the most in 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the article says, in more evidence of buoyant appetite, an auction of 10-year JGBs drew the strongest demand in 13 years, followed by an upbeat 30-year sale 2 days later. So, these bonds are like hot. They're hot
Yeah.
shit, man.
Fuck.
Everyone wants them.
Damn.
They're fucking free apple pies at McDonald's, man.
Seriously, right? Yeah, just like, I gotta have this
Yeah.
pricey shit. Yeah. Yeah, it's gotta be something to do with the exchange rate. Like, because, you know, financial trading, as we've mentioned before, and which I've observed, you know, even in like the kind of capitalist context, like they don't fucking deny it. Like money behaves differently in small and large volumes, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's just a fucking number.
Yeah.
So if you have access, you have power over that number, then and you can spend it as you will, more or less, right? If you have some kind of liquidity or whatever, or you can make it liquid quickly and cheaply, then like if you're able to buy, say, 1 billion yen, and then do the little fucking, you know, convert back trick
Yeah.
that we just talked about, then you're making something like, I'm guessing like, you know, $250,000 or so,
Yeah.
you know, because the transaction cost is probably some fraction of that you can fucking afford.
Right.
Right. And then, and the transaction happens like once or twice, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like, you know, thousands of times. Because if you're a small trader with almost, if you're like a fucking, what do they call them, penny stocks or something, right?
Yeah.
Blue chips and shit.
Day trader.
If you're just like, if you've got like fucking $100 to work with, you're not making any fucking money on that.
Yeah.
If you have $1 billion fucking dollars or like $100,000 to trade into yen. And
Yeah, I mean,
back
if you have $1
again,
billion and your shit gains like 1 basis point or whatever, that's like,
it's massive.
that's like
Yeah.
$10,000.
Yeah, that's the whole fucking trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all you have to do is deploy a bunch of fucking grunts to kill some fucking Middle Easterners
yeah.
indirectly through influence.
That reminds me. Yesterday, I was thinking about. This is like so fucking random, but gray water systems.
Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like gray water is water that is like dirty, but not like
Not
harmful.
unusable or
Not like
something?
biohazardous.
Right. Yep.
And then black water is water that is biohazardous, which basically means like piss and shit.
Yep.
So the famous mercenary group was really named Piss and Shit.
Hell yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I work for piss and shit.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So next time you talk about mercenaries, just call them Piss and Shit.
And Eric Prince is the prince of piss and shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So another case study is the United States.
Of all places.
Yeah. The United States, surprisingly, does not have top ratings from bond rating agencies. So Treasury bonds haven't really been in default in the sense that they weren't paid, like ever. Mm-hmm. But in 1979, payments of $120 million to bondholders, which, come on, $120 million. That's a lot for us, but that's not
That's
anything
nothing
for
to
them.
those people. Yeah.
So they came late once,
Yeah.
which was due, according to the Department of Treasury, to technical errors in processing them.
Yep.
So because of some computer bullshit,
Yep.
$120 million came, it was probably like a week late, maybe. So the error caused the interest rates on U.S.-owned securities to increase by 6 basis points, which equates to about $600 billion a year.
Oh my god.
So that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yep.
But the bond ratings weren't downgraded until very recently, August 2011. So, you know, according to the smartest geniuses on the planet, the lower bond ratings meant that the price of U.S. Treasury bonds went down, which obviously that's what happened. Just kidding. The prices actually went up, which meant, of course, sales went down because of supply and demand. Just kidding. Sales didn't change significantly because demand for bonds is created through fiat
Hey.
and not supply and demand, because supply and
the
demand
real
is
science.
75% bullshit.
Yep.
That's all I really have on bonds. Yeah, we could talk about the other government bond, the one that works for MI6. Just kidding. I don't want to talk about that. I mean, unless you really want to. How are we doing on time?
We got
We're at
about-
an hour.
Yeah. Good.
So,
amount of time.
should we read this terrible article?
Yeah.
Of
course.
I may have quoted this article before. I'm not sure. So if I have, just hit next on your playlist, I guess.
Yeah. Fuck it.
But so this is an article from March in the Washington Post opinion section.
Oh God, we're off to a
Classic
galloping
bastion
start
of-
here. Yeah.
Of good thinks.
Yeah.
Good thinks from brains.
Yeah. The most brain geniuses of all brains.
Yes. And it's by Lawrence H. Summers,
Oh,
who
yes.
I am certain that we've mentioned on the show before, in the context of Venezuela, because he was the president of the World Bank. So, once you hear what this article is about, you'll know that there is no conflict of interest in what he's saying,
Yeah.
and you can trust him.
If for whatever reason you can't remember the taste of vomit, you're about to remember.
Okay. Where'd my comments go? What's up with that? Oh, they're there. Okay. All right. So the article is called "The Left's Embrace of Modern Monetary Theory is a Recipe for Disaster." Great start. So, we've seen this movie before. There is widespread frustration with the performance of the economy. Traditional policy approaches are not delivering hoped-for results. A relatively unpopular president is loathed to an unusual extent by a frustrated opposition party that lost the previous presidential election while running on a pillar of its establishment. And altered economic conditions have led to the development of new economic ideas that reflect a significant break with the previous orthodoxy. See, that's one case where I would say it was wrong to start that sentence with a conjunction. You shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bad idea.
Bad idea, dude.
Anyway, and he does it again.
Oh.
And now these ideas, why didn't he just say now? Like, did you think that flowed together well? It's a whole other paragraph, you dumbass.
Look, he's trying his damnedest to sound human.
He's not a writer. It's fine.
Yeah.
He has talent in other areas, like giving bullshit loans to third world countries so that their economies collapse. Which, that's a skill we need just as much as writing.
It's a bit like riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
Once you figure it out, you never forget.
And now these new ideas are being oversimplified and exaggerated by fringe economists who hold them out as offering the proverbial free lunch, the ability of the government to spend more without imposing any burden on anyone. You know how economists that aren't on the fringe never oversimplify things? And, yeah.
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 Yeah. This is just classic, like...
There's people that were just saying that supply and demand governs the interest rate
right.
of the economy.
Right. Oh, my God. It just reminds me of all the bullshit, like... you know how like right wingers are always accusing people of the things they themselves are guilty of, like this projection
being in a bubble.
Shit. Yeah.
Not wanting to accept hard truths.
Yeah. It's like this is the same shit.
Yeah.
Oh, you're oversimplifying it. You're not really looking at the facts.
MMTers are just telling you what you want to hear.
Right. You're like, oh, huh, interesting.
Which
interesting.
In my experience, whenever I say things like taxes don't fund spending, the government can create as much money as it wants, inflation is when businesses raise prices, the government creates all markets, and markets don't exist outside of states.
Yep.
People love hearing that stuff, and they just accept it right away.
Yeah.
I never get any pushback on my ideas.
Oh, yeah, no. People don't think I'm
That's
fucking
why
out
I'm
of my
so
mind.
calm all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. During the late 70s, this was the story of supply-side Laffer curve economics. It began with the valid idea that taxes had important incentive effects and that, in conceivable circumstances, tax cuts could raise revenue.
Okay.
Sure. It grew into the ludicrous idea that tax cuts would always pay for themselves, and this view was then adopted by a frustrated extreme wing of a major political party. So he's careful not to say right wing.
Yep.
As you'll see
As
later.
they tend to be, yeah.
George H.W. Bush was right during the 1980 presidential primary
my
campaign
God.
to call such thinking voodoo economics.
So that's like racism and anti-left.
Racism and pedantry.
And pedantry, yeah.
In the decades following, that doctrine did substantial damage to the U.S. I don't know if this guy knows that his whole thing is like just providing an ideological rationalization for the things that the ruling class already wants to do. And that's exactly what supply side economics was. It was just like, oh, we want to pay fewer taxes.
Right.
Hey, eggheads, go figure out a way to explain to these fucking dumbass idiots that vote for us that this would be good for them. And then they came up with supply side economics.
But surely this man makes too much money to be perverted by that sort of thinking.
Right. So, modern monetary theory, sometimes shortened to MMT, you could have put that in the beginning of the article, I think, is the supply side economics of our time. A valid idea that traditional fiscal policy taboos need to be rethought in an era of low real interest rates, has been stretched by fringe economists into ludicrous claims that massive spending on job guarantees can be financed by central banks without any burden on the economy. At a moment of economic and political frustration, some in the more extreme wing of the out-of-power political party are seizing on the possibility of a free lunch to offer politically attractive ways out of economic difficulty.
See, I see that you highlighted that fucking phrase or that sentence.
Diatribe.
That fucking diatribe. And it's like, that shit has been like, that fucking sentence right there. They sat at a fucking table and they workshopped how to fit as many fucking like passive-aggressive accusations as possible into one fucking sentence.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, the more extreme wing of the out of power. And it's like, yeah, because being out of power is bad.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And just lazy comparisons to the other.
Strategically, it's bad.
For the case they want to make.
But, yeah, exactly.
Like, this is all just
free lunch.
because it's politically attractive.
Yeah, right.
Both sides are they're just as bad as each other because all they're doing is they're trying to get into power.
Right. It's all the
so they
same
can
game, you know.
Do their own thing, which is they're just their beliefs, their opinions.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because that's true of libs, but
yeah,
and also like the free lunch thing. It's like that just never. I mean, it's just like the free healthcare thing. You're like, we already paid for it, and you're like, you kept our money.
Right.
You know, basically. And so we want to use the money that you took away from us, the value that you took away from us, etc.
Yeah.
You know, towards something that's actually helpful to us. Like that's the compromise. They think this is extreme shit. It's like, no, that's the middle fucking ground.
Yeah.
Like that's the middle ground.
The extreme shit is
on
kill
the way
everyone.
to killing you. Exactly. Where we go
kill all
shit.
of your friends.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You.
Exactly. Like, it's in fucking insanity. Yeah.
I mean, we could do the politically unattractive thing if you want.
If you really
which is
want
bad.
us to get into it. Yeah.
Not many people think that's very nice and attractive.
Yeah.
You know?
So we're like throwing you a bone here when we make policy suggestions.
Yeah, you're really throwing it back in our face.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of annoying. It's really fucking getting on my nerves.
So Larry continues.
Larry.
Modern monetary theory is fallacious at multiple levels. Why did he tell us what the abbreviation was if he's just going to use the full thing?
Yeah, that's a good question.
MMT is fallacious at multiple levels. First, it holds out the prospect that somehow by printing money,
What?
How could the government possibly print money?
No,
definitely not with
refuse
the
to
money
believe
printers that it
this
has.
is possible.
The printers that print the money that we use.
No, they couldn't possibly.
Yeah. No, really what has to happen is they have to take the money trees that we currently get our money from and the money
which are
fields
carefully tended by
that we pump it out of.
Loompas.
Yeah, and what you need to do is you take those money trees, you cut off branches, and you graft them onto black locust trees, which grow much faster than normal trees, and so they get very big very rapidly. But the problem is the black locust trees are invasive.
Right.
So eventually we'll just have too much money.
Yeah.
It'll just take over everything. We won't be able to grow anything else.
That's why
you want to have your avocados. I know you millennials love avocados. Guess what? Those grow on trees. And if you have too many money trees, guess what? You can't have any avocado trees.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, millennials. Checkmate.
So that's the problem with that whole thing.
Yeah.
So somehow by printing money, the government can finance its deficits at zero cost.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
In fact, in today's economy, the government
yeah.
pays interest on any new money it creates, which that's by choice, but okay.
Yeah.
Which takes the form of its reserves held by banks at the Federal Reserve. Which means the Federal Reserve System, which is
Yes.
the government's central bank.
Yep.
So like
The one that is
it doesn't matter that it owes money to
in
it because
cahoots. Yeah. Yeah.
the bank just creates money out of thin air.
It's like it's
So
well, I don't know.
well, yes,
We should forcibly retire this man.
yes, there is outstanding currency in circulation, but because that can always be deposited in a bank, its quantity is not controlled by the government. Even money finance deficits cause the government to incur debt.
Again, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, who gives a fuck?
The government has nukes, if you've heard of that.
Yeah, and tanks and
Yep.
probably mech suits that they're keeping from us. I would say.
Oh, I'm sure.
Um,
Why the fuck do
I mean,
you
Boston
think?
Dynamics made all those terrifying robot dogs that I am
Yeah.
100%
Oh, yeah.
sure
That's
are
to
going
turn
to
on
be
your
the things
civilian
chasing
population
us down
Yeah,
with machine
exactly.
guns in the future.
That's literally what that's
with
that's used
biometric
for.
scanners,
Yeah.
with data that they got from 23andMe.
Yep. And
Don't send your
fucking-
DNA to a fucking
and
business,
Facebook,
guys.
yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's either that, or they're designing like designer viruses
Uh-huh.
that will search for the specific genetic
specific
markers
genetic,
that are
yep.
in like
I mean,
the
that's
more rebellious
Already in
lower
the
class.
works. Yep.
And they're just going to release a virus that just it goes to you and doesn't do anything because you don't have those markers, or it just fucking kills you because
Yeah.
you're going to be a resistor.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't want to bring it up like this, but have you heard of GRID,
No,
the
what is that?
disease, also known as HIV or AIDS?
Oh,
Yeah. I'm just going to leave that there. It was so bad that he decided to end his life.
that's the sound of me dying.
Yep. It's the bottled in bond government rye that we're drinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep.
Sorry, I just went down the wrong.
That's that hunter killer virus. It got you.
They're killing me because
That's how it happens.
they found out that I found out the truth.
Yeah.
They're listening in through my mic, and I'm dead now.
There's 100% interest rate on your health.
This is a really shitty way to end the podcast,
0%.
but actually, no, it's kind of cool. I have to admit. Jesus. How
can't
about we take a
save
little
you.
break so I can
Yeah,
recover my voice?
let's do a break.
Okay, so I'm no longer dying, and our scare of losing all of the audio we recorded
That
is
was
over.
Terrifying, actually. We came back to Ryan's PC with all the fucking equipment set up, and it was like it had like crashed or something.
Yeah, and I saw a screen that I've never seen before that was like, I hit the power button because I was like, oh, I guess it put itself to sleep,
Yeah,
which is weird.
And weird,
But okay.
boot screen.
And then it was like, your battery is low. Do you
Yeah.
want to continue booting into BIOS? And I'm like, well, first of all, this uses UEFI, so I don't know why it would be booting into BIOS at all.
Yeah.
But then, it started up Windows like you were just starting it from cold boot,
From nothing.
or whatever.
I mean, I have to assume, because I'm a rational human being, and I know a lot, and there's no way
Nerd.
that delusions would misguide me. But I have to assume that while I was entertaining your smoke break on the porch, talking about like left Unity and shit, that some fucking Fed snuck in the back door and like stuck a fucking thumb drive in and corrupted your shit for a
Yeah,
second. And now
that's
they're listening to us talk.
Definitely what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was all part of their plan. They heard me talking
Yeah.
about
Well, they know that our
future weapons
podcast is extremely powerful.
Yeah. They know
and
about our
that-
power. They know about my predictive abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they didn't stop Neighbor Science, then this would be the one true podcast to start the great uprising.
Yeah. The Great Awakening.
The one great uprising and awakening. Yeah. The true end of history.
So where were we when I started dying? So, okay, yeah, right there. Perfect. So, continuing on this hilariously awful article.
Oh, yeah.
So, Larry Summers continues. Second, contrary to the claims of modern monetary theorists, it is not true that governments can simply create new money to pay all liabilities coming due and avoid default.
Okay, so the summary of that sentence is no.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all he actually said.
As the experience of any number of emerging markets demonstrates, past a certain point, this approach leads to hyperinflation.
As we've demonstrated, it does not.
Yeah. The certain point, of course, being when there is a massive political upheaval.
Right.
And the emerging markets being the economies that he destroyed as president of the World Bank.
Right. Because he's a fucking dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More like Dick Summers.
Dick Summers
Got him.
at the World Dick Bank.
Wrecked his ass.
Wrecked it.
Indeed.
Summer dick ass wrecker. Okay, anyway.
Indeed, in emerging markets that have practiced modern monetary theory, no example of this or anything like that, you know.
Indeed.
Can't name a one.
Right. He says indeed and then doesn't do what indeed implies he's going to do.
Yeah. In emerging markets that have practiced modern monetary theory, situations could arise where people buy 2 drinks at bars at once to avoid the hourly price increases.
Did he write this at a bar while he was fucking double fisting? Like, what's going on, Larry? I
mean, that already happens. It's called happy hour.
Yeah. We do this all the time.
And it seems to work fine.
It's fine. This is how you make money, actually.
Yeah. As with any tax, there is a limit to the amount of revenue that can be raised via such an inflation tax.
Wait, what?
I'm going to read that again.
Yeah, say that again.
Because that made no sense.
Could be the Rye, could be Larry Summers.
As with any tax, there is a limit to the amount of revenue that can be raised via such an inflation tax.
He's just basically... He's literally saying what he already said, which is the same as no. He's just saying that you can't raise more than a certain amount of money because he's saying it's limited by tax.
Oh, he's just saying
like, oh, tax.
No, what he's saying is inflation is basically just a tax. And
I see.
By spending more money,
right.
then it causes inflation, which is just like a tax.
But
so fucking bright.
I mean, if inflation is essentially what, like the aggregate, like rise in prices by various businesses.
Oh, well, actually, it's when money becomes less valuable.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, the price of money.
Yeah. Which you mentioned in an Onion article earlier. I know that I've mentioned this on the show before, but my favorite Onion headline ever is markets in turmoil as the price of money skyrockets to $90 a dollar.
Yes.
It's so fucking
such a good one.
And that's basically what he's saying here.
Yeah.
So he says, if this limit is exceeded, hyperinflation will result.
Yep.
So, like, no definition or example or evidence or, like, explanation of how this is supposed to work. It just does. You know, it's called economics. Why don't you go take a class on it? Third, wow. I'm just going to attribute that to me dying. That's what the undead sound like. They don't sound, like, cool and gruff, like, they're like, whoa.
My ball just dropped.
Brains.
Brains.
Third, modern monetary theorists typically reason in terms of a closed economy.
What?
I mean, yeah, in the sense that an economy is closed to, like, the currency that it's based on.
Yeah. Which is
nobody that isn't like a fabulously wealthy person in the U.S. can, like, go convert their dollars to yen and buy Japanese shit instead of American shit.
Yeah.
So it kind of is a closed system.
Yeah. But, okay.
But there's another conjunction at the beginning of the sentence. He loves that. He loves it.
But
apparently his teachers didn't drill it into him hard enough that he shouldn't do that.
it's like that meme that I've seen of like, it's like a hydroelectric dam.
Uh-huh.
And the dam's labeled, "I'm not racist." And then there's a huge hole where all this water's flowing through, and it just says "but." And it's like, this is what he's doing, but with like economic shit. Like, but actually,
But
I'm Larry Summers.
But a policy of relying on central bank finance of government deficits, as suggested by modern monetary theorists, would likely result in a collapsing exchange rate. Oh no. That would certainly do something about something.
That would certainly cause him to lose his job at the World Bank, which
Yeah.
is responsible
That's
for
what this really is,
maintaining
isn't it?
colonial relations.
Yeah. That's definitely
That's
what this is all
basically
about.
because yeah, the exchange rate is, as we mentioned, like it's kind of like the bond rating thing where you're like, oh yeah, everybody in the imperial core magically has good scores. Everybody in the periphery magically doesn't have good scores.
Right.
Like everybody in the periphery magically doesn't have like strong currencies, you know? Or like if their currencies are doing okay, everybody's like, "Oh, what a miracle. Oh, capitalism did this." And you're like,
Yeah.
capitalism actually tried its best to stop this from happening. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So collapsing exchange rate. This would in turn lead to increased inflation, increased long-term interest rates because of inflation.
The long-term price of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Risk premiums, capital fleeing the country,
Oh,
and
yeah,
lower
right,
real
right.
wages
Like
as
all
the
the
exchange
like
rate
all the real
collapse-
Venezuelans we've been hearing about. Yeah.
and lower real wages as the exchange rate collapsed and the price of imports soared.
Oh no, the price of imports. Again, living in the core, all you fucking care about is how cheap your stolen shit is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I'll have to look into this, but I don't know how much the exchange rate really affects the price of imports.
Well, it
Because the price,
Right.
the cost of imports
Yeah.
is determined by the economy that the shit is produced in.
Yep.
And then the price in this country is there's a cost floor to it, but the price really is determined by what they can charge for it.
I was actually going
the
to
good.
say. I was actually going to say exactly that. Like he's doing the classic like fucking like neoliberal economics blah blah blah, where like he thinks that like wages and exchange rates and price of imports and all this shit exist in some kind of fantastic like
Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah, Rube Goldberg machine of like abstract mathematical relations.
Yeah.
Because that's just how, again, like I mentioned, joked before, like that's just how a bunch of swamp apes evolved to do things naturally,
Right.
according to the fucking grace of God and cosmic,
We geniusly built this system that's a bunch of levers with ropes tied
right.
to each other.
Yeah, and like it's just exactly how it always will have worked and all this shit. But like we know, like, as best as we can know on the left, that like wages are the fucking devil first, but like they're set by like these fucking proprietarians, these business owners and shit like that, and like exchange rate is a power relation of some kind, and it may mean different things in different contexts, but it's basically it's a power relation, it's an imperial relation, and the price of imports is essentially the like something that's set by businesses and bureaucrats, capitalist bureaucrats, because of their relative power in the exchange rate kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Right? Like the exchange rate is just a symptom of something, right?
Right.
The wages is a device,
Right.
Things like that. And the price of imports is both a symptom and a device, So the price of imports, in a more realistic way of putting this in social terms and political terms, is just, oh yeah, like you said, like, well, we have this relative power, relative to them, And here, the system, like the situation right now in our system, has wages for these people like this, wages for those people like that. And so we're just going to like fucking put a number on it.
Yeah.
And the price of imports is like that. You know, this is a human fucking process. This is not magic. This is not math per se, right? It's not algorithmic per se. It's just people doing one thing or another.
Yeah.
Because they're more or less powerful.
But yeah, so it's like a classic conservative argument where they bring this up when we're talking about minimum wage. It's like, oh, well, if you raise the minimum wage, that's going to raise the prices of the stuff they produce.
Yeah.
With the conceit being like, oh, it's going to wipe out all the benefit of raising the minimum wage. But it's like, yeah, if you do any, like even just the most basic math, like raising the minimum wage at McDonald's will raise the price of a burger by like 1 cent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who gives a fuck?
Yeah. And also the other thing that I like to bring up in that particular example is that raising the minimum wage will only raise the prices because owners and managers insist on being paid exorbitant amounts for their very paltry contributions to the running of the business. Like they do almost nothing, as we know, and they get paid above and beyond what really anybody should be paid for what they do for that, and let alone for
so like
for
the
any
whole thing
particular
is
job.
like, oh, good point. The minimum wage will raise the price of goods, so we should put a maximum wage on the executives.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
they have to go down.
Yeah, which is actually
Problem solved.
right, and like to cite another kind of like, well, this is less tanky per se, but this is more like just like pro PRC. Shit, which
Dangism is the most perfect philosophy ever. Is what you're gonna say, I think.
Well, actually, I wasn't gonna say.
I mean,
that.
you put it in the show notes, so and I'm just reading what you
got
put down here.
Yeah, damn. But yeah, I forget which podcast it was. But they were talking. Maybe it was Pearls again.
Okay.
But they were talking about how like in China, they capped CEO pay at like 12 times the minimum wage or something. Right. And I was like, you know what? That's actually a good start. Yeah. Like, it's a fucking fair start. In my opinion, I was actually thinking about this earlier this week. I was thinking about that, and I was like, shouldn't we just say, if we're going to have an unequal wage system, if we're going to have that, right, and we're trying to figure it out along the way, shouldn't we, at the very least, in this kind of soak dem kind of way, instead of saying, like, a number, like a multiple, that's pegged to some just random number like 12. I would prefer to see it as either a percentage, like increase, right? Like they're capped at this percentage more, right?
Oh, like raised over time.
Yeah, something like that. And so then people be like, oh, I'm making progress in a moneyed way over time, but then you have other kinds of ways to deal with the fucking like inheritance and shit, you know. Or maybe even better,
we can even go more liberal, like Jeff Bezos isn't allowed to eat iguanas while there are still homeless people. How about that?
Yeah, there's that. Yes. Well, I mean, if we're going to be liberal about it, you know, I think I would make a law that just says like Jeff Bezos doesn't get to live, but like, you know. But we're starting small.
I mean, obviously, I agree. Throw him into Darvaza gas crater.
Yes.
Get in the
Actually,
pit.
I think we should lower him in. I think instead of throwing him, we should lower him in. This is the
lower
ultimate.
Lower him into the pit.
Yes. The true left wing schism is: should he be thrown or lowered? Okay.
Oh, and the other thing is this is like. If the exchange rates collapse and the price of imports soar, that's just like the same shit as a tariff, which historically has improved the conditions of the countries that they're in. So, like, what's your fucking point? Okay, so let's keep going.
Oh man, more Larry Summers. Oh my god,
we're almost done. We're almost done,
folks. This is torture for us too. You know, you have to understand.
Basically
we're doing
the same
this
thing as waterboarding.
We're doing this to ourselves for your sake.
Yeah.
The reasons are unclear, but we're doing it.
Which, by the way, you know, I choked on some rye earlier.
True.
So that's
choking on rye is
as
a rough way to go. Yeah.
I know what it feels like now. I don't like it. I think it's torture.
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, again, this is not just theory.
Sure. Okay.
My comment was,
this is
LOL.
Yes. I was going to go, this too is ideology.
This too
Yes, right. I didn't quite get it. Yeah.
I've practiced
Yes.
Zizek quite a bit.
Yes.
numerous emerging markets have found contrary to...
That sounded like...
That was good. That was good.
I ruined it at the end there. But anyway. Numerous emerging markets have found, contrary to modern monetary theory, that they could not print money to cover even their domestic currency liabilities. And again, these are emerging markets that he and his friends forced to adopt a currency board system, which means that they have a pegged exchange rate against other currencies.
Yeah.
So modern
There's
monetary
no
theory
way that
doesn't
they
apply.
can improve.
It's like literally the
meaningfully.
second thing that they say when they're like, this is when modern monetary theory applies.
Yeah.
One, you have a sovereign currency that you issue and control the issuance of. 2, it is not pegged.
Yeah.
So 2, you didn't make it to step 2, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah, you fool.
Yeah.
You're getting owned by fucking podcasters, Larry Summers.
Nerd.
Nerd.
The same is true of industrial economies. The Mitterrand government in France is it Mitterrand? Mitterrand government in France in 1981 and the Schrader government in Germany in 1998 began with MMT-type approaches to policy and were forced to reverse course.
By whom is what I always have to ask.
Weren't they on the euro in 1998?
I thought so. For those of you who are wondering, the silence is us getting in the car to drive to the library to look this up in a book.
Yeah, I'm totally going to leave all the silence in. Okay, so the currency was introduced in 1999. So right before the euro.
Okay.
So
I
don't know about this shit. And the other one was 1981. So, okay.
Well, I'm
but I'm going to go ahead
curious.
and guess that these were not MMT-type approaches.
I was actually going to ask, because again, like weasel words, right?
Yeah.
Like, which is just
MMT-type
this
approaches
entire
to policy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, what is he really saying?
Yeah.
I don't know shit about Mitterrand in 81 or the Schroeder government in 98. Yeah. But
Mitterrand's Keynesian policy failing.
Okay. Like, is he conflating Keynes with MMT? Like, I get how that might happen, but to some extent. But, like, also, starting right off, characterizing the French government as socialist, that's...
Oh, did it?
Yeah, right there.
Oh, wow, yeah. Okay.
Like, oh, yeah, classic move, you know. Everything that tries to take care of anybody is just socialist, and, you know, I mean, fucking bullshit.
Yeah, so this is like exchange rates.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which-
So, corralling.
Who gives a fuck,
basically corralling the argument back
I mean, I
into
guess it
fucking...
matters more in Europe where there is
Yeah.
more direct
Yeah.
trade between countries with different currencies, but,
Yeah.
you know, the euro is kind of having a crisis as well, and they aren't following MMT policies. They're following the Larry Summers school of finance.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I would say
I don't know, Larry.
the problem probably isn't the MMT stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on, the British and Italians both had to call in the International Monetary Fund during the mid-1970s because of excessive reliance on inflationary finance.
Wait, isn't that what neolibs do?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, excessive reliance on inflationary finance. That's literally what we fucking do.
Yeah.
This is more projection.
Yeah, and shockingly, during this time, there was a major crackdown on labor and public spending by right-wing British politicians.
Yep.
So that probably didn't have anything to do with it.
No, nothing at all.
Yeah. Supply-side economics was an unreasonable extension of valid ideas. Yeah. Few today advocate the top corporate tax rate of 46% and rates above 50% for a substantial swath of taxpayers that prevailed in the late 1970s. What the fuck is he talking about? I think the rye is kicking in a little bit on this one, but if you advocate the top corporate tax rate of 46% and rates above,
I think
a lot of people do actually.
Yeah.
Most people think that
Like
corporate taxes should be high.
really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guess he didn't see the Fox News thing. Oh well, this was before that happened. So, anyway. All right. Last couple sentences. Almost done.
God, Larry, you're really putting us to the fucking ringer
Oh,
here.
this sentence is terrible. So, too, in a new era when the Fed chairman thinks that neutral real interest rates are well below 1%, we can approach federal borrowing with much less trepidation than we have traditionally. What? All right, let me rearrange this. In a new era when the Fed chairman... What the fuck is that? That neutral real interest rates are well below 1%. I don't know. I can't parse that.
This is some finance bullshit.
Yeah.
This is
Let's
just
just finish.
fucking word garbage.
There's just 2 more sentences left in this
Yeah.
dog shit pile. But for neither the right nor the left is there any such thing as a free lunch. It's the responsibility of serious economists, whatever their political party, to make this clear.
All right, I'm going to make this clear. There's a free lunch enforced for rich people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically the system.
Also, food grows out of the ground all the time without you having to do anything for
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
there literally is such a thing as a free lunch. And if you don't think that, that means...
You fucking idiot.
You've never been in nature before.
Yeah.
And probably just get all your food at like Au Bon Pain or something like that. Or Pret a Manger. Or some fancy fucking stupid restaurant.
Yeah.
I don't know. But where does the cellophane grow in nature, you ask?
Oh, does
Well,
oh,
it
does
grows on
nature
cellophane trees.
does nature produce cars and battleships? Well, we don't need either of those fucking things. So, like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm oppressed because nature makes me work to get food. Nature doesn't just provide food for me.
Well,
that's what communists think.
Yes. Real self-crit hours here, folks. We've drunk a few ounces of rye, and we're trash now. So,
you know, one thing I was just thinking about is this guy's basically saying, like, I know that it's obviously very tempting for you to embrace these policies and to just like start issuing money all willy-nilly because, you know, that just seems like a very normal thing to do. And this guy probably also thinks that communism wouldn't work because of a human nature.
yep. Oh yeah.
And how
guaranteed
it requires us to alter human nature, which is impossible.
Right.
Because people will just do the things that they naturally do.
Right.
Which definitely does not include falling for attractive policies like spending a bunch of money on public services.
Right. Right. Or negative interest bonds.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in conclusion,
We must follow Bushido.
I hope your soul is still intact after listening to this.
Yeah. This was a tough one, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like my brain has been cleaved in half.
Yes. Mine is actually boiled.
And not the two halves
blanched.
that are like glommed together, but like the top and the bottom half that's supposed to be together.
Right.
That's what happened.
Yeah. The owning class and the working class.
Basically, I feel like reading this article was harder on me than drinking the whiskey.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, whiskey is fun.
Yeah.
reading this article was like a fucking
It's like the joke blogger top 10.
Yeah, yeah.
Except
Reading this article was like
Yeah.
what the cops make you do when they find that you've been drinking. You know, like, oh my fucking god, they're like decipher Larry Summers.
like if I had a kid and they were really bad, I would read a Larry Summers article to them, and they would never do that shit again.
Exactly. You're like, now do you believe that human nature is good? Now that I've made you do this? Yeah! No, God. I believe I can be bribed or cajoled into doing things that are better for the human race.
All right. I think that'll about do it. Glad we didn't lose this recording. That would have been really fucked.
Yeah. For those of you who are still conscious anyway.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed that, more power to you.
Yeah, you poor bastard.
I feel like a lot of our episodes end this way. It's like, if you enjoyed that, you are a mutant, and
yeah.
your brain has been totally broken, probably by us. So check out our other episodes, neighborsciencepodcast.com. Check out our merch.
Yeah. I'm wearing a t-shirt right now.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah, I think I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It's the Valley of
I'm
the
going to
Wind
have to get one
Authority.
myself. I might get a hoodie. Although
I think this is good as a hoodie.
I wish they had zip-up hoodies, but I don't think they do.
Yeah. I
Which
prefer the
bothers
zip
me,
hoodies.
'cause, they're so much better.
Yeah.
I don't like
Pullover
pulling a thing
hoodies
over
are
my
like
head and ruining my hair.
Yeah.
My perfect hair.
Right. Pullover hoodies are for like fucking like, varsity athletes and shit.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's true. It's just true.
Or stoners that need to fit like their entire bubbler in their kangaroo pocket.
Yes. Yes.
Their bubbler and 1 ounce.
Yeah.
and the paper clip they use to clean their bubbler out.
Yep.
And a lighter with those hemp wicks wrapped around it, which is a better way, of course, to light your smokables.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder, and you have to explain it to literally everyone and tell them about how good it is, but somehow it's better. I'm guessing by your reaction, you've never met one of these people
Oh,
that
no.
have the hemp wick on their lighter.
I've actually...
It's actually way more. It's not really a pullover hoodie thing. It's more of a drug rug thing.
Oh,
Someone who's wearing
okay.
a drug
Okay,
rug.
yeah.
That's
I was gonna say,
which I guess is
I
technically a
spent
hoodie.
several years in Seattle, and I don't know if I ever met the Hempwick people.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just not a thing.
I
there.
lived
don't
with
know. I don't know.
so many of them.
Yeah.
So many of them.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
One of them tried to
Interesting.
murder me.
Oh,
It was a whole
perfect.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The one non-chill stoner.
Yeah. Well, it was the vodka that did that, I think. But
that'll fuck you up.
all right, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.